In the next section, what we're going to do is we are going to animate our robot. But before we get to that point, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to come in here into Options, I'm going to hit Configure, and I'm going to shut off that picture in the background. I'm done with it, don't really need it anymore. So that will take care of that. Students will often ask me another question. They'll say, how come I'm seeing wireframe in this and colored in this? Well, all you have to do is go into Display and choose Grunge Shading, and the same thing on this one, Grunge Shading if you want it, or if you want to see a little bit more, you can say Grunge Shading with lines, and then that will give you an idea of where the polygons are and everything in your object. So that will allow you to see your robot. Now, the next part of the housekeeping is we're going to arrange things in such a way that we're going to be able to animate this. If we look at our robot here, and we're going to look at these two pictures here. We have a side view right here, and we have the perspective view. When my robot walks, I'm going to want his legs to move. I'm going to want his arms to move. I'm going to want his claws to move. And I'm going to want his torso to tip forward and back. Okay, the head is going to have to look left and right, and I think that's about all we need him to do. In order to do that, we're going to need to do some grouping of this object. So we have the head, the ears, and I've got that called pyramid. I think I'll change it to nose. And so the first thing I'm going to do is the ears, the head, and the nose are all part of the head. So I'm going to go ahead and, in this case, I'll just drop them into the head. So the nose is in the head, the ears is in the head, and I think that will do it on that. So I can close that up. And so when we see the head, we see all those things highlighted. Now, I'm going to create a new object, but in this new object, I'm going to call this object the torso. And the torso is going to be the claws, the wrists, the arms, the body, the neck, and the head. Well, in the arms, all of those things are already contained, so I don't have a problem there. So I'm going to choose the right arm, the left arm, the head, the body, the neck, and the shoulder. So the only thing that's not included in this is the right and left leg. I'll go to Objects, and I'll say Group Object. It'll names it Null. I'll double click on it, and I'm going to call this torso. So now I have my torso group. I have my left leg and my right leg. One last detail that we need to take care of. When our robot moves, it all moves. The legs move, the torso moves, everything. So we need to have an object that includes everything. So I'm going to choose my torso, hold my Shift key down, right leg, left leg, and I'm going to take this object right here and I'm going to say Group Objects, and I'm going to call this one, oops, I'm going to double click it, and I'm going to call this Robot Complete. So there's my complete robot here. Now, if I open this up, there we can see my robot complete, which contains the torso, and then I have my right and left arm in here, my right and left leg. So I'm really ready to begin animating. Here's how we go ahead and begin animating. I can probably pull this back a little bit, and I'm going to change layout from startup to animation. Animation is going to give me a timeline on the bottom, and it's going to allow me to do something to make the robot walk. Before I start on any of this stuff here, I'm going to put a little background into my scene so that my robot can sit on the background. So let me go into create here, environment, and let's put a floor in. So there's the floor, and unfortunately my robot is sitting, as we can see, halfway through the floor. So let's go ahead and take care of that too. We'll take our robot. We've got robot complete selected, and we'll choose this. We'll go ahead and lift him up so that he's standing on the surface. Let's give the go back here. There's other ways to do this, but this is just a real quick way of doing it. Let me go back here and give the surface that the robot's walking on a little bit of a color. So we'll say new material, and we'll double click on it. We'll leave specular on. We'll kind of dial that down just a little bit. There we go. That's fine. And let's choose our color here, and I'm gonna make this kind of a gray color. That looks good. We can change it later on, and I'll call it floor. And just like always, I'll just drag it out here and drop it on. So now we've got our robot walking on the floor. We'll go back to animation. So we have our animation. Well, the first thing that I'm going to want my robot to do is I'm going to want him to walk a little bit. So I'm going to take where my robot is right now, my robot complete, and I'm going to make a keyframe. We're on 0 here. I've selected my robot complete, and I'm going to choose keyframe. And we can see that we've put a keyframe in here, and we're in the keyframe mode. Now, this is my robot's right leg. It looks like left to us, but it's the robot's right leg. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I've got that. Yep, there's my right leg. And I'm going to need to move that right leg. Before we do that, though, we've got a little issue that we're going to have to deal with. And again, I'll go into here to startup so that we can see it. When I have this robot walk, the robot is going to walk, and his leg is going to move on the robot's hip, I guess we could call it. And so I need to make sure that the robot's leg will rotate about the hip. If we look at the right leg right now, it is not going to rotate about the hip. It's going to rotate much higher. Let's go ahead and see if that's true. So if I take the right leg here and I move the right leg forward, you can see that the leg is rotating way up high in the arm. That's not what we need it to do. So I'll do a Command Z, and here's what we need to do. And this probably should have been done in the housekeeping area. I'll come over to here, and I'm going to choose this tool right here, which is my Axis Modification tool. So I'll select that, and then as we're looking at this right here, I'm going to move my axis down. And let's see here. Let me go into that view completely. And I'll say right at the top of this claw looks like a good spot for it. Now let's do the left leg at the same time. We're going to keep the view the same, and I'll just come down here and I'll move that over. Okay, so now the leg will rotate from that point. While we're doing that, let's go up and look at the arms, because the arms need to rotate on the shoulder here. So let's choose the right arm, and we'll move the right arm rotation point up. And notice that we're still in this tool, and all I'm doing is moving it up. Let's take the left arm. We'll rotate that up. There we go. So that's rotating on the shoulder. The only other thing that is going to rotate on here is the claws will rotate and the head will rotate. Let's go into another view to look at the claws. This is our front view. And let me bring it down here. Come on back. And we'll go into the full view. If I take the right arm and the left arm, and I believe we're looking at, yes, we're looking at the right arm right now, you can see that it is going to rotate on that wrist properly. So I don't need to touch that. I'll assume that the other side's the same. Let's just double check here. And that is, now we'll pull down a little bit and make sure that the head is going to rotate on the center of the neck. So we'll take the head right there. And the head is going to rotate on the center of the neck. So we're in good shape with all of our rotations now. Let me go back to here. And with this done, I can turn my attention to my robot walking. So I'll pull this back here so we can see this. I'll move him up a little bit. We'll go back to animation. Don't need quite that much animation room. And I certainly don't need that to be quite that big. Okay. So, what I'm going to do here, because this has a tendency of making mistakes happen because I've made changes after I keyframe something, I'm going to go back to the robot complete now, and I'll choose to make a new keyframe. So there's a new keyframe with the proper rotation on everything. And let's go ahead and start the robot walking. So I'll click on, I don't need my arm opened up, and I forgot that before I start the robot walking, I'm going to want him to raise his arms. So I'm going to take the left arm here, and I'll say I'm going to want him, we're working within a 90 frame movie right now. We'll adjust that later to about 30 frames to 300 frames, but right now it's fine. So I've got the left arm, and let me pull this down just a little bit, and I'll pull this down a bit too, and I'm going to shut off my axis tool right here by selecting something else, I believe. There we go. And in this particular case, I want to use my rotation tool. So I'll choose the left arm. And with the left arm selected, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to rotate the arm to about 90 degrees. All right, that's where I'm going to do it. But here's the problem. I'm stuck on frame 0. So let me undo that. Let's move our frames ahead and we'll say, I want that to take about 15 frames to lift his arm. So again, I'll do the same thing again. I'll rotate the arm forward to about 90 degrees. And I'm going to put a keyframe in there. I'll do the same thing with the right arm. Rotate that forward to about 90 degrees and put a keyframe there. So now we have a keyframe for the right and the left arm. You'll also notice that prior to me clicking the keyframe, the right and left arm did not show up down here. Well, they didn't know that they were being animated. So until you keyframe something, it really doesn't know that it's being animated. Obviously, the computer doesn't know anything until you tell it, but it's the way I'm talking about it. So I'm going to pull this down just a little bit. I'm going to say, okay, the arms took 15 frames to move up, but I'm going to have him take his first step around frame 10. So I'll go back to frame 10 here, and then I'm going to choose the right leg. And in this particular case, I'm going to rotate the right leg forward about 15 degrees, I think is what I'm doing. So I'm just looking at the screen here. We're going to adjust this later, but I'll just say that 14.9 is close enough. So our robot makes his first step forward. So I'll keyframe that. Now, remember that we created the torso. The reason why I created the torso is that my contention is that when the leg goes forward, the body has to tilt forward as well in order for the weight to transfer onto the foot. So what we're going to do is the foot has gone forward to 10 frames. I'm going to have the torso move forward to that. I'll have it lag maybe a frame behind. I may change that later, but right now it seems like it's a good idea. So I'm going to choose the torso here. I still have my rotation tool. This time I'm going to rotate the torso. I'll rotate it down about 5 degrees. There's 7, 5.2. That's pretty good. And I'll make a keyframe there. So we can see that torso has been keyframed and the right leg has been keyframed. So we've got all of these kind of things working. Now, what we're going to have to do is five frames later, and I'll go to 5 frames later here. 5 frames later, I want that robot to be putting weight onto that right foot, standing up straight, and moving forward. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go on frame 5, we're going to go back to the right leg. The right leg is going to be moved back to 0. And again, we're just going to get it close. The right leg goes back to 0. I'll keyframe that. And the body, which is the torso, is going to go back to 0. Because the robot is directly over the top of everything, and I think that's around 0. You will see later on where I can adjust that precisely. And I'll keyframe that. And now the left leg, not the left arm, the left leg is going to have to go back 15 degrees. Because what has happened is that the robot has stepped forward, and so by stepping forward, it's going to leave the left leg a little bit behind. Let me think here for just a second. Yes. Okay, so this is at 15 frames. So this will have happened at the same time the other one did. So I'm going to go ahead and keyframe this. Now let's go ahead and look and see what happens in the first 10 frames. Now we have one problem here. We actually have 2 problems. Both of them are my own making, and so we can go ahead and fix those. What happens is that neither of the legs were keyframed at frame 0. So I'm going to take the left leg, I'll rotate the left leg back to 0, and again, I'll adjust it precisely later on. And that's at frame 0. I'll put in a keyframe, and I'm going to take the right leg, and I'm going to rotate that one back to 0. And I'll keyframe that. Now let's watch it. Oh, and we can see that we didn't do the arms. So the arms will be put down to 0. And keyframe that. The left arm. And you can see that what I'm doing is I'm doing this backwards a little bit because I screwed up. But it's not. So I'll put a keyframe there, and the body, the torso, also needs to be tipped back and keyframed. And I'll keyframe that. Okay, so let's take a look and see what our animation looks like now. So here we go. The arms are coming up. The first step is coming out. And we have a little bit of a problem because we don't want the left leg going back as the as the right leg is coming forward, but we'll fix that. So this is really about all we're going to do in the keyframe. Oh, we need to do one more thing, and I'll show you what that is. So here we are on frame 16. At 15, everything stopped. So in order to swing this leg forward, the back leg forward, all the way to the front, and this one to go back, we need to sort of unweight this leg. The way that we're going to unweight it is to tip the body backwards a little bit. So what we're going to do here is probably in this next 2 frames, and again, this timing is going to be something that we adjust a little bit. I'll move forward to 17. I'm on torso here. I'm going to rock the torso back, not anywhere near that much, about 2.5 degrees. And I'll make a keyframe here on the torso, right there. And I'm going to move forward to 20, and on 20, the this leg is going to be at 0. The front leg's going to be at 0. So let me go into, that is the left leg. So the left leg's at 0. We'll keyframe it. The body, the torso, should be at 0. And we'll keyframe that. And at 25, the left leg is going to be all the way forward. Come on, there you go. All the way forward, 15 degrees. Close enough. And the left leg, or the right leg, would be all the way back. And we'll keyframe that. Okay, so let's see what happens over our first 25 frames. So our robot raises his hands. He starts to walk. Okay, so far so good. Let's put it back here. Let's also have the robot look left and right as he starts to walk. So at frame 10, I'm going to take the head object and I'm going to rotate the head object have him look that way, about 45 degrees. Keyframe it. At 30, he'll be now at 30, let's see where we were. At 10 frames, he looks there. Again, I forgot to keyframe the 0 position. So then at 20, I'm going to figure he's back to center, and then at 30, he's going to look all the way the other direction. So let me go ahead and have him move this direction. And we'll keyframe that. We'll go back to 0. We'll 0 the head. always important to keyframe the initial starting position. So I keyframe that, and so now the head is going to look back and forth. So we have the head looking back and forth, we have the body rocking, the arms are going up, and the only other thing that we need to do is have the claws rotate. So here the arms are up, and so as it walks, these hands will rotate back and forth in a menacing fashion. So before I'll start on that, let me be smart this time and go ahead and keyframe the claws. So I'll actually keyframe the hypernerve. There's the claw. Let me think. Do I want to keyframe? I'll keyframe the hypernerve at 0, and let me do the hypernerve on the other side. And I may have a problem with that, and I'm just going to look at it right now to see if I do. Yes, I do. And here's what the problem is. So I'm going to go into torso. I'm going to open up right arm, and there's a hypernerve, and I'm going to do Command Z, and I'm going to see if that hypernerve, let me keyframe that, take the keyframe off of that, excuse me. Torso, here's the left arm. Okay, so the left arm doesn't have it. So what I'm going to do is go into the left arm's hypernerve. I need to go into here and adjust the position on that. That was one of those ones that I forgot to do, and you will see, if this isn't successful, what problems we have with that. So I'll pull that over. I'm going to pull it down, not that it needs to be pulled down, and then it's in the right position there. Okay, so that one's fine. Let me shut this off here. And it's not going to, it will not keyframe. That is one of the problems. You can see that the claw moved, and again, that is one of those reasons why you try and put everything in the right position first. So as a substitute, what I'm going to do here, so I'll actually take the claw, which is in the right place, run 0, and I'll keyframe the claw. This one I'll keyframe 2, and we'll see what happens with it. I'm just a little concerned about the hypernerve, but hopefully that won't be an issue. So here's where we are. We move this forward, and so there's his hands are up. We need to have the claws start rotating in some sort of menacing fashion. So I'm going to go to frame 15, and at frame 15 on the left arm claw I'll make a keyframe. Then I'm going to move out here to 25, and on 25 I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select my rotation tool, and that's not the view to do that in. And in this, in the rotation tool, I'll rotate it about 180 degrees. And I'll change that later. I'll probably go 360 degrees, and I'll keyframe it. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing with the other claw. So I'm going to choose the other claw. I'm going to go back to frame 15. At frame 15, the other claw, I'll keyframe it and move forward to 25. 25. Again, not that view. I'll do something like this and keyframe it. So let's see what happens here. Let's move forward. Robot's looking right. His arms are coming up. He's going to start walking. He's looking left. And let's see here. Okay, the claws moved. Okay, so we've got all of our elements selected. Now, the timing's not perfect on all of them, but we're pretty close. We've done all this in keyframe mode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to F-curve. F-curve gives us a tremendous amount of power. I'm going to switch this up here so that we can see how the F-curve works. And I'm going to take a short break here, and then we'll be right back.